Hello, hello.
Hi there. How are you?
Hey, good, good. So thank you for joining BPIAChats today. I'm your host, Alexandra Maloney, and I hope everyone is staying safe and listening during this time. The purpose of this series is to share the experience and the insight of members of the international affairs community and hopefully to inspire the next generation to explore opportunities in the field. Also, the thoughts and views of our guest speakers are their own, and we're currently streaming this live, and this talk will be posted on our IGTV and our YouTube channels afterwards. So if you haven't already, please follow Black Professionals in International Affairs on Instagram, as well as our guest speaker, whose handle can be found on the flyer, on their flyer on our page. And lastly, we encourage viewers to chime in below in the thread with any comments or questions that they may have. So without further ado, I will introduce our guest speaker for today. Miss Ashley J. Hobbs is a Jersey born and bred new media story builder and storyteller. Most currently, she serves as producer of digital and podcasts for Essence Communications Incorporated, producing all 5 shows across Essence Podcast Network, including Webby-nominated Yes Unbossed, The Color Files, The Solve, and the new Generation Z facing podcast, Magic Unfiltered. She also writes for exonicole.com, a site geared towards the empowerment of the modern woman. Ashley recently launched her own audio production company, Temple and Riot Productions, which develops, produces, and distributes fiction, narrative, and hybrid audio content from from those whose stories aren't often centered. Her goal in everything she creates is to encourage, inform, connect, and evoke. So thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So to start off, I'm curious if you could share a little bit about how this COVID-19 situation is affecting, you and the work that you do.
Yeah, it's definitely been an adjustment, as you know, I guess with anybody. But it's, I was thinking about it this morning and I was like, wow, like our whole team has really just kind of like risen to the occasion. I mean, because the show must go on.
Mhm.
And so we're still cranking out podcast episodes. We just were nominated for another Webby Award.
Ah,
Like it's
congratulations.
happening. Like so we're just it can be a little overwhelming because working from home, you technically are working more hours than
Right.
if you were going into an office and coming home. Um, but we just learn how to set boundaries and keep it moving.
Which I find ironic. I know for me, for example, I realize I feel like I'm working more now at home and tempted to do more work, in different hours than I normally would if I was like sitting in an office.
Yeah, it's like it's definitely like trying to find a balance some sort of way, you know? Yeah.
hmm hmm So could you tell us a little bit more about your journey and what got you to where you are now?
Sure. So, I've always been a creative person. Like if you ask my family, they have stories from when I was a child of just any little way artistically I could express myself, I would, whether it whether it was cutting my hair off or painting on a wall or whatever the case was. I was always trying to express myself creatively, and it was something that I just found joy in it, and it felt like it was always the right thing. Whether it was music, it didn't matter as long as it was something that was creative. But when I got older, I realized that the things that I wanted to pursue, a lot of my family just didn't understand, and they were like, "Okay, that's cute, but what are you going to do to make money? Like, how are you going to be able to sustain yourself?" And so I kind of ditched all of the creative things and went for a more like academic path. So I was, I worked at my college, I was a grad assistant, I stayed and got an MBA. Like I did all the things that everyone said would make me successful. And they were like, "Oh, you'll graduate making no less than like 60K a year. You have an MBA." But I graduated in 2011. So,
Mm.
the world was a crazy place economically and all of that. So it was really hard to get a job. I eventually did. I worked at a college in Jersey. Then I bounced over to a Black women's nonprofit in Brooklyn. Then I worked retail for a little while. It just seemed like everything that I tried to do that everyone else told me was the right thing, it just didn't work out. Like it wasn't, there was no longevity for me.
Mm.
And so I eventually ended up in the DMV area. I was working at an ed tech company down there. And I was working there for about 8 months. I cried every single day. I did not love the job like I thought I would. It was the most stressful time of my life. Because it felt like no matter how hard I tried and no matter how much work and effort I put in, it just wasn't, there was always something wrong, something wrong, something wrong. And I would like wake up in the middle of the night, like, oh my God, did I send that email? Oh my God, it was just stress all the time. And I was down there by myself.
Mm.
So 8 months in, I got fired.
Mm.
And, in the moment, it's
Or
just
as you could
like,
say, promoted to your next position in line.
okay, okay. So it was just, in the moment, you're like, no one wants to be fired. You don't want that like kind of like stain on your record. And then it was just kind of like, okay, I feel like God is telling me to go ahead and do all the things that I said I wanted to do from since I was young. So I threw myself into learning everything I could about production. I volunteered at American Black Film Festival, so I learned about event production. I took some classes in DC. The craziest thing I did was taking a class in DC on Tuesday nights and then driving up to New York for Wednesday nights because I had a fellowship at an advertising company. And I did that for 8 weeks.
Wow.
But I was like, I'm not working. I'm getting my unemployment checks coming in, so let me just make the most
Right.
of this time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in doing all of those different things, I was able to see what I loved and what I didn't love about production and where I would fit in. And so in that experience, it kind of led me into podcasting, because podcasting for me, it was like me living in Jersey, because I moved back to Jersey. Living in Jersey and not working full time, I couldn't afford to go in and out of the city to actually like, produce on TV shows or films or whatever the case was. But podcasting, you can pretty much do from anywhere. And
Right.
it's like a back door into Hollywood, if you really think about it. A lot of the biggest fiction podcasts have become TV shows. And so I was just like, how can I figure out a way to do storytelling my way with no money? And so I started to produce podcasts for free with some friends, and then for Black Film Space podcast, shout out to Black Film Space. ABF Creative, shout out to them. We worked on a podcast that was the narratives of mothers whose children had been killed by gun violence. And so from those experiences, it kind of led me toward Essence, because they were looking for some digital producers. And my first job with them was last April. So it's been just about a year since I came into the fold at Essence.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Hi, and welcome to those who are joining in. We're here with Ms. Ashley J. Hobbs with Essence Communications Incorporated. And we're just talking about, her journey in terms of, having a nonlinear career path. So I'd like to ask, in follow up to this kind of idea about this nonlinear journey. So what would you say sparked your interest in, this kind of communication space and this creative storytelling space?
Yeah, I mean, I was a person that I was writing stories from the time I was young. And honestly, Essence Magazine was the reason why I went and got a bachelor's in journalism. And I actually had the opportunity for an internship with them my senior year of college. But with my course load, there was no way that I could trek from South Jersey to New York every week. So I had to let that opportunity go. But I was always a writer. And it's just so funny that it's like, 11 years later, it's like full circle, because I'm working at Essence, where the reason why I started to write in the first place. But yeah, I mean, from the time I was 14 years old, I was like, I know that I want to be a writer. Let me go to school for journalism. Wherever it was that I was going to go to school, I knew that I wanted to go to school for journalism. And I think writing has always been a part of my career, even if I wasn't in necessarily a writing job, if that makes any sense. So I was teaching, but I was teaching English, right? I was working at an ed tech company. I was working with students and helping them write papers. You know what I mean? So it was all these different ways that writing was consistently a part of my journey. And then I kind of fell into the podcast space because it's storytelling.
Thank you for sharing that. Everyone, please continue to feel free to drop comments and questions in the thread below. We have one person, or actually one of our board members from BPI, Vannery Kong. She's asking, how has working in digital communications impacted communicators of color and communication? I think what she's asking is, how has this impacted the intersection of digital communications and storytelling and communicating within communities of color and highlighting voices of color?
I'm sorry, how is it highlighting voices of color?
I think so. Or if you could just talk about kind of the intersection of how digital communications, digital platforms are giving voices of color a platform to be included in.
Yeah, I mean, you look at an institution like in Essence, right? This is our 50th year, right? We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this week, I believe. And you look at just the legacy that it's had in bringing some of, I would say, the faces and people that weren't necessarily recognized on a grand scale, bringing those people out to the forefront. And I think that that legacy has impacted a lot of the different digital communication spaces. I think that there's a long way to go for a lot of them, because I tell people all the time, especially in podcasting, when I go to different conferences about podcasting, or you're in these different conversations, it's very white and it's very male still. But there are so many podcasts that are hosted by Black women, or people of color just in general. But I mean, for me specifically, I'm like geared towards Black women that don't get the shine and the recognition because they're considered too niche, or whatever the case is. So it's like this cycle that keeps happening that we continue to have to break in every single facet of communication. But I think that we're kind of like breaking that door open and saying, hey, we're here, we're going to be recognized. You know what I mean? So I see both sides of it happening. And I'm one of those people where I'm constantly telling people, like, what's your story? How do you want to put this out there? Like, let's work together. Let's figure out how to do this, because I think that people of color, their stories have to be told. And it should no longer be considered niche and pushed to the side. It should be mainstream. And so I think that,
I agree.
Yeah, I think that is starting to happen more. And I'm just glad to be on the forefront, I would say, of that, just with all the things that we're doing. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So for some of our younger viewers, maybe, college age, or even some high school viewers, how would you describe the intersection of kind of the international space with digital communications and podcasts, right? So the fact that these digital platforms are reaching international audiences, or highlighting and sharing international Black voices, whether it's from the Caribbean or Africa or the UK. Could you speak a little bit about the intersections that you've seen with your career field, and what that looks like kind of in the nexus of the international arena?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, I think that before I got into podcasting, my view was very limited to Black American experiences. And then once I got into podcasting, I'm trying to consume as much as possible to understand how everyone does it. And I was really blown away just to see just the wealth of experiences that are out there internationally. You know what I mean? And even just I guess, like, the cross pollination in some of these shows. Like, you have shows that have someone from, I don't know, Korea, and they're in conversation with someone from Ghana, and I think that those those platforms and those shows and those stories are so important, because it shows that there's more than one way to tell a story. There's so many different ways to relate to people. And I think an international stage, if you will, is important, especially in times like these. Like, we're in the house. Where are we going?
Yeah.
We need to be able to hear multiple stories, especially now. Like, a lot of people probably didn't care to know anything about other countries until this pandemic hit, because they wanted to know, well, what happened with the people who this hit before it hit us? You know what I mean?
Right.
And then, but by way of doing that, then you start to realize, like, okay, someone from Italy is not so different from me. You know what I mean? These stories that you wouldn't necessarily care to know about, you start to know, and it gives you a greater appreciation for humanity. And so I think that's like a long-winded answer, but I think for me, it's just internationally, interculturally, I think that, especially when it comes to podcasting, I think that it's been a blessing for a lot of people, because they've come to understand people who don't necessarily look like them, or who are from the same spaces as they are from. So
Thank you for sharing that perspective. We're here with Ms. Ashley J. Hobbs, who is with Essence Communications, Inc. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the thread below. So my next question is, can you tell us a little bit more about your company, Temple and Riot Productions? And how has that been starting that up? And can you share more information about that?
yeah, it was something that I didn't realize I wanted to do until January. And I guess it's because, like, you know, it's the start of a new year and you're just thinking about all the things that you want to accomplish. But again, since I've always been a storyteller, and I've always been a person who wanted to help other people tell their stories, I hate when we say, you know, we're a voice for the voiceless, because I don't think that anybody is voiceless. I think that people just need help amplifying their stories. And so that's kind of like how I look at what I do, is I'm just finding and helping to amplify the stories that are already out there. And so Temple and Riot is just born out of that desire, finding stories and helping people to figure out how they want to tell them best. So I've done, I want to say since the beginning of March, I put a call out on all my social media platforms, asking specifically Black women who are interested in podcasting, but who don't really know what to do, how to get into it, telling them, like, hey, let's get on a consulting call free of charge. And I think I've had about 50 calls since then. I didn't expect the volume. I don't know what I expected. It was just like, let me put this out there and see what happens. And it's been pretty amazing, because no two stories have been alike. And most of the people who I've spoken with have really solid ideas for podcasts. And that's not to say that anybody can do, you know, podcasts. There are, you know, basics and things that you need to learn and that you need to do in order to have a successful podcast. But everyone had the real, like, really good bones for a podcast. And I'm just, you know, I'm always telling people, for us, it's in our DNA to be great storytellers. It's just a matter of putting the pieces into place for it to be successful out in the world. And so that's what Temple and Riot is all about. I have a few fiction podcasts that I'm developing right now. And I just want to see where it takes me.
Great. Thank you for sharing. We have one question here that's asking, and I'm going to reframe it on what I think is being asked. But so someone has interest in okay, I'll try to, let me just try to ask the question, because I'm a little confused by reading it. But the question says, what's the best way to tailor messaging around international events, international policies that affect the Black community? So maybe if someone has some interest in, you know, exploring how to share these stories, do you have any guidance or advice for how someone can do that?
Yeah, I think now is the best time to get creative. We've seen that with all the IG lives and the the club quarantines and the uh what is it? Summits and things that are going on.
Right.
Everyone is pivoting and figuring out the best way for their particular organization or their message. And I think it's a matter of knowing your audience. I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up. They don't understand exactly who their audience is or what their audience might be into. And so what goes wrong a lot of times is messaging that's pretty much the same way it's been for 40 or 50 years. And we're in a time where if technology is changing by the hour, you know what I mean? Digital platforms are changing by the hour. And so we have to be able to keep up. I think it's about making sure that you understand the latest messaging systems, right? I attended an event about a month ago on a platform called Hop In, where you could literally have a whole conference. You had a main stage, you had a backstage, you had a place where people could go and network, you had booths where people could sell things virtually. And I think more so than, I think that everyone understands their message, but I think that they need to understand who they're speaking to and how to get to them effectively. I think that in a while, some of the things that we've been doing for the past couple months to pivot during this COVID-19 situation, they won't be as effective anymore because it'll just be noise, right? Everyone's doing it. So now how do we pivot and figure out something else? So I think the right platforms, figuring out what's accessible to your audience, because that's another thing too. Everything is not accessible to everyone.
Right.
So I think making sure that you're aware of all of those different things will help you to get your message across to different communities. I hope that was helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. It was helpful. Look, you just provided me with some new ideas, with some perspective. Where for the whole thing called, was that with the with Quarantine Con?
No, that was actually Exo Nicole. They had it was like a whole lineup of people. And they did like little things on the main stage. They had a DJ who would come in between, and I was just like, this is amazing. It never dawned on me that you could have a whole virtual conference and it could feel similar to something in person,
Yes, and that platform, just to speak on a little more about what you were saying, that platform, from my understanding, was created as a startup pretty recently during this time. So to see how quickly things can move and be developed, because that was just such an interesting platform. Quarantine Con did a career fair that we helped, promoted through BPIA last week. And like you said, it was amazing. Main stage, DJ, the recruiting booth, sessions, live sessions, networking things happening all simultaneously. So things that, in my opinion, they said wouldn't be possible through digital or virtual, And I love the idea that an organization like that is also backed by kind of a mission of looking at more sustainable ways to do this. Do you really need to fly out to Dallas to do something that can be done virtually? So I like that as well. We have a question here from Miss Naya Nikki. What advice can you give someone who is interested in working at Essence? That's my dream company.
Oh, you guys put me on the spot. I mean, that's not necessarily, all I can say is I would just say pitch. If you're a writer or whatever the case is, pitch, find the editor of, whichever vertical you're interested in and pitch. Make sure that you have really good and interesting pitches. And I would say just read the content, because that's something that a lot of writers don't actually do. They don't read the content to find out how they can align their work with that particular brand. You have to be very familiar, and whether it's Essence or any other brand, you have to be very familiar with what they do most, what they do best, what it seems like they're doing a lot of right now. Like a lot of brands are doing a lot of wellness content right now, especially for, the time that we're in. So I think being very aware of the brand that you're trying to pitch, so that you're as aligned as possible. And I don't mean to say, you know, completely like drown your voice in what you think they want, but I think find what's interesting to you that aligns with that brand.
Thank you for answering that. So I'm curious, what do you like most about your work, and what are some of the what's the most challenging things about the work that you do?
I'm sorry, there's like a spider on the wall, and
Oh,
it doesn't me. Hold on. I'm sorry. I have to. Okay.
You're so calm, because I would have jumped out of the seat. Like the lab would have had to end right there, and we would have had to restart because.
No, I got it. We're good.
But I was asking, so what do you like? What do you like most about your work, and what would you consider to be the most challenging aspects of the work that you do?
What I like most about my work, if I'm completely honest, is the team that I work with. I have never loved the people I work with more than I do right now. My executive producer, Tiffany Ashite, my associate producer, Chantel Holder, all of the hosts of Essence Podcast Network. We just mesh so well. And I think that also speaks to, for me, that speaks to just the power of Black women who have a similar goal in mind. And we're all just about the work. Like, how can we get this done? I mean, we could all have 6 million things on our plate, but if someone comes up with a really great idea, we'll figure out how to execute it, because we're all creatives, and we all want to do meaningful work. And I think that's half the battle, is working with people who want to do meaningful work and who, I mean, especially with my boss, like, she's the type of person where she's not going to just tell you a list of things to do. She's going to be right in the trenches with you. You know what I mean? And so that propels me more, because it's like, if she's going to sit here and work until 7, then I'll sit here and work until 7. I'm not saying that we, you know, in an unhealthy way, but I'm just saying, like, it gives you the motivation to do what you need to do, because everyone is in it together. And you don't see that a lot of places, or I haven't seen that in a lot of places. So I think that's one of the things I love the most about what I do. And then you asked what I like least. Is that what?
No. What are some of the most challenging things about the work that you do?
Yes, that's a diplomatic way to ask that question. The most challenging, I think, right now it goes back to what I was saying earlier of the adjustment of working from home 24/7. I didn't realize I didn't have boundaries until we had to work from home. And so now it's like, okay, I have to make sure that I have time for myself in the morning and time for myself in the evening. Before, I was up at 6 to catch a train by 7 something to get to Brooklyn by 10. You know what I mean? So I didn't have time in the morning. I wasn't eating breakfast. Now I juice every morning. You know, I pray, I meditate, read my Bible, like all the things now that I was not leaving myself any room for before. So I think that's been the most challenging, was just making sure that I maintain boundaries, because my home is my work. And even in the space, like, I remember one time I tried to work out of my bedroom, and I was like, "Ooh, I will never do that again." I have to have a designated space away, so that I don't just kind of like inundate my whole home with my work. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So, what do you think has been the best professional decision that you've made in your career path?
The best professional career decision. I honestly think it was not applying once I was fired from that ed tech job. It was not applying for other jobs that I knew were not in the vein of what I really wanted to do. It was holding out, which meant that once my unemployment ran out, I was working part-time as a ticket taker at a local regional theater. And that's like, you know, it can make you feel very small, you know, when you're 30 something years old and you've made these decisions because you know what you really want, and you're making $10 an hour. But I just believed so much in what I really wanted to do. I just felt that this is what I'm going to do right now because it's going to pay off in the end. Me being a part-time ticket taker allowed me the time to work on my podcasting skills, so that once the opportunity to work with ABF Creative came up and then to work with Essence came up, I already had a solid skill set that made it easier for my now boss to say, do you want a full-time job? You know what I mean? And so even though it was hard financially, and hard, like, you know, for the ego, because no one wants to be 30 and making $10 an hour. But once I got over that, I think that it was just the best decision for me. I'm not saying that's for everybody. I think that you should definitely like look at your options, pray on it, and see what works for you. But I wouldn't change that because it set me up for where I am now and where I'll go. And so I'm just really, really thankful that I didn't give in and take a job, you know, someplace that I probably would have left in 6 months because I hated it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And who's to say if you went another direction at a different time that you would still be where you are on that same trajectory?
Right.
So
Exactly.
that's how I like to look at some of those kind of pivots at different times where I'm like, why did that happen? Or why did I end up going doing that or being here at this place? But, you know, if I didn't go that direction or if I wasn't in that space, I don't know if I would be in the direction I'm in right now.
Right.
Because maybe in that space I was in a different headspace, or I realized I need to do something different here. And then that even propels me further as I'm just like reflecting on what you're saying.
Yes.
So I have one more question to ask, and then feel free to put any concluding thoughts onto this question. Okay. But the question is, if you could speak to your younger self, is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started this journey?
Ooh, how much time you got? Then I think I wish I would have known that everybody is just figuring it out. There's no one who's reached a level of, oh, this is how life works, I'm following the blueprint. There's no real blueprint. It literally is just whatever your path is, and life is just a series of choices. I also wish that I had known that my family didn't know what they were talking about when they tried to push me in this direction or that direction. And that just because you make a choice that's different from what your loved ones think is right for you, it doesn't mean that you don't love them or that you don't value them or their opinion. But we all have agency over our lives and our careers and our callings. And I think that I would have told my younger self that it's okay to march to the beat of your own drum. And if this is not the thing, then it'll be the thing that leads to the thing. Yeah. And that's not my quote, by the way. That's Bishop T.D. Jakes. But it was just so profound to me because it's just, you're not going to die if this job doesn't work out that you thought was the thing, right? It'll just lead you. If you listen and if you look closely enough, it'll lead you to the thing. And so I think that those things would be what I would tell my younger self. Also, I would have told my younger self to buy Twitter stock.
That part. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey and advice. What's the best way if folks want to follow you? Where can you be found?
You know what? I'm always on Twitter. So Ashley Lascurley on Twitter. And you'll follow the Essence Podcast Network wherever you listen to audio. We're doing some really great things. Something really awesome is coming up for Mother's Day that I think everybody will be into. But yeah, for now, those are the best places to find me. And I'm on LinkedIn, Ashley J. Hobbs.
Great. Ashley, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined in today to listen to this interview. It'll be posted on our IGTV and our YouTube channel afterwards. So please follow BPIA and you can